was ours. We ruled this land. We owned the night. But man rose up against us. We were overthrown. For centuries, hidden away in darkness, tortured by thirst, choking down dust, starving. Until now, our hunt begins again.
Welcome YouTube. Today we're gonna have my first impressions on this newly released early access game called V Rising. So the first place that I tend to gravitate towards is the options of any games. There was nothing too special in terms of the options. I did notice that there's quite a bit of controls, but that's expected in any type of game of this genre. Of course, there's going to be some building, there's some PvE, there's some PvP involved, but a lot of the controls seem to be quite aligned with what we would expect in similar games. Still a lot of keys to memorize or to get accustomed to. In terms of graphic settings, I've allowed my NVIDIA GeForce experience to tailor the graphic settings to what it believes are most optimal for my video card. As we can see, all of the graphic settings were set with high settings. From the perspective of sound, I guess that it depends the type of headset that you have, but I've left everything to default. I did notice the voice chat for multiplayer is also there. When we look at the play styles, there's 3 different options. We have online play, the private game host that you can host yourself, and there's the option to host a dedicated server as well. To get started, I decided to just host a private game on my computer on my LAN. But I was quite surprised with the preset rule sets that are made available. I find that kind of neat, as we can imagine with survival type of games. If we think of Ark Survival or Valheim even, there's always so many options that are made available to us. I kind of like the fact that in this particular game they took the time to define some possible balance combinations based on predefined rule sets. So some of these rule sets are made to accelerate the pace of the game. If you want the game to be a bit less grindy than usual. And when we look at the advanced settings, it really shows you the amount of control that you have if you decide to ever host a private game or even a dedicated server, that is. Most of the options are aligned with what you would expect in any type of survival-based game. It really did make me think of Ark. What I liked with this is that a lot of these options seem to be controlled within the game itself, in comparison to other games where you had to go into configuration files and really start looking at how to implement those in a bunch of configuration files alone. So we can see here that there are an enormous amount of options that you can set to tailor your game experience, whether you're hosting a private server or you decide to go down a more dedicated server approach. Character customization. Let's customize our vampire for our adventure. as in any survival games, it's always pleasant to have the ability to create a character that resonates with our personality. In this particular instance, it seems that there are quite a bit of control in terms of both colors and predefined sets of faces, hairstyles, features, and accessories. I was pleasantly surprised to see that we have the ability to put some neat accessories on our vampires without those accessories being locked behind some type of a paywall. That definitely did add to some of the final touches that we can use to personalize our vampire. And of course, there are quite a bit of predefined color sets, which are surely to add to the uniqueness of our characters for both our private servers, dedicated servers, or even online plays. That is definitely something that I found was somewhat lacking in Valheim, where it was quite difficult to create a character that really stood out in terms of uniqueness. Even if you think of skin tones or even hair colors, you were somewhat limited, and I think the same would hold true from the perspective of Ark Survival as well. At some point in time, I mean, a lot of the characters just end up looking the same. Of course, you had a lot more control in Ark Survival from the perspective of body types, but in terms of the uniqueness in colors, that's where everything started to just kind of blend the same and look a bit too similar, in my opinion. And on to our first adventure. It seems that we spawn in a coffin. What else would be expected for a vampire? We seem to start in some type of a crypt, which is our house or a cave. The first thing that I noticed was the fact that we are in third person views. This game seems to be third person driven. I did not have the opportunity to look if first person view is an option. It might be, or with time, it might become an option through modding, for example. Character control is quite standard. WASD will move your character around, and then we have the element of mouse pointing, for directional attacks, and full camera rotation on a 360 degree for the control of our the orientation of our camera, which makes it still quite interesting in terms of balancing where our mouse pointer is pointing when we're in combat. We have to also keep in mind this camera orientation. In a way, I kind of wish that there was the ability to have an auto lock for the camera. Sometimes we don't necessarily want to have to continuously adjust the camera orientation, and as you'll see in this very short gameplay, it can become slightly cumbersome when you're in combat. I mean, typically you want to focus on the movement, on your mouse positioning, to direct your attacks, and then when you add this layer of spells on top of it, and some of the spells are directional, of course, it becomes a bit much to have to manage as well the orientation of your camera. I find that's something that I'll definitely look into. Maybe there is the possibility to have your camera automatically locked in terms of the orientation of your character. But other than that, from a first impression, I think that the third person view was the most surprising to me. I didn't know how much I would enjoy that. But in terms of the UI at the bottom of our screen, it's quite typical. We have our hotbar that runs 1 through 9 for our items. F key to pick up items. And we can see that we have a few spells that are made available to us right away. Spacebar being some type of short teleportation. The R key seems to be some type of blood fireball that's sent onto enemies, and then our C key is a counter attack, which is interesting on its own. I did also find it interesting that there is no concept of mana or energy when it comes to our spells. Everything is cooldown driven. I mean, that's something that I'm quite used to coming from a game such as a League, for example, or there's a lot of games that are cooldown driven, but for the fact that all of your spells are cooldown driven and none of them are driven by energy or mana or some other type of metric, might become quite interesting when it comes to more advanced type of combat techniques. But overall, it's quite simple. I mean, it seems that the two resources that are most common at the beginning of the game is collecting bones from fighting some skeleton zombies, and then hitting plants seem to give you some fiber. And we can see that I was able to quickly craft a bone sword, which was kind of neat, to have the ability to have a weapon this quickly. And it just makes combat a bit more fun. And it's time will tell how this particular game pans out, but I think that the third-person view and the control in terms of the camera rotation will be the two most challenging part for myself, to be able to really immerse myself into this game and find it a winner. But we'll see. So here's a bit of gameplay, and then make sure to watch my other videos on V-Rising as we dive into this game and start looking at all of the elements that are offered by this new title.